Okay, so my name is Donald Miller, and Donald, just like the beer, Miller, but I prefer to be called Don, Don.
And can you say how my name is?
Oh, so, okay. Hello, my name is Don Miller.
All right, Mr. Miller. Were you born in Muncie? Where were you born at?
I was born in Portland, Indiana, so small farm town, 30 miles northeast. So one of the things that I think about that is growing up in Portland, going to high school there, you pretty much knew when you graduated high school, there's not a lot of good jobs in Portland, so got to move, got to go someplace. So I left Portland and went to General Motors Institute, GMI, called Kettering now, and worked at Delco Remy Anderson. Left when I was 17 and worked at Delco Remy Anderson. When I first started there, 20,000 people there, and in '83 I quit to come to BorgWarner, and there was about 8,500 people left. So it wasn't like I was the first guy to figure out that this ship is sinking. And I remember talking to my dad, telling him I was going to quit General Motors. And in the mid '80s, my dad was a lifetime farmer, and he was like, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" So yeah, leaving Delco ended up being a good deal, going to BorgWarner.
When you came to BorgWarner, did you feel like you said it was a sinking ship in Anderson? You felt it back then. Did you feel like you were coming on stable ground here at BorgWarner?
Well, when I went to BorgWarner in '83, actually BorgWarner was one of the few places that was, it was growing. BorgWarner during the '70s had been really tough, time for them. And I started in March of '83, and the employment around that time got to somewhere around 2,800, just less than 3,000. So it was a place that was hiring people, and it was, the early '80s were a big recession also, sort of like today. And so for a place to be hiring, it was a little bit unusual.
And when you got the job, what they hired you to do?
I started as like a manager in the quality department. When I started at BorgWarner, I started as a manager in the quality department. I had, I think, 5 quality engineers that worked for me, and we mostly dealt with the customer. At that time, big in automotive, made manual transmissions, made transfer cases, boat transmissions, and fork truck transmissions.
How long did you work at BorgWarner?
I started to work at BorgWarner in '83, and then I first quit BorgWarner in 1997 because somewhere around '88, '89, BorgWarner made the decision to move the boat transmission business and the fork truck transmission business out of the Muncie plant, and they moved it to a plant in Massachusetts. And then in '96, BorgWarner sold the transmission business, and so that left with just the transfer case business. So, okay, at that time I was in my mid-40s, and I told my wife, I said, I'll not retire from BorgWarner. And at that time, her mother and father and my mother were living in a retirement village in Bern, Indiana, not so far, a little bit north, 50 miles north. And I told her, I said, my idea is I need to find another job within 2-3 hour range of Bern so that we can see our parents occasionally. So I quit and went to a small company in southern Michigan, and then I came back to BorgWarner in July of 2002. And okay, BorgWarner had done very well during the time I was gone, really a little bit to my surprise. And when I came back, I still suspected that, okay, finally it's going to leave town and go. And yeah, so I worked there from 2002, and then I quit the second time in November of 2007.
When you came back, can you describe some of were there any differences in terms of how the plant was managed from when you had been there previously? Any sort of changes?
When I come back in 2002, the difference in how it managed, I wouldn't say so much in how it was managed, but I would say again, I first came to BorgWarner in 1983, and from General Motors. And I wouldn't be the only person that came from General Motors that thought that they were the best. There's the Alfred Sloan quote about what's good for GM's good for America. So people at GM were raised to think that they were the best, and I think rightfully so. I looked down my nose a little bit at BorgWarner in '83 that they weren't really a first-class operation, and so again, I'm not trying to take credit for it. I think it just evolved during that time frame that from '83 until 2002. In 2002, I think BorgWarner was every bit first class. Did everything as well as any auto parts maker in the world. So, I mean, the cleanliness of the place for sure. When I first started in '83, there was you couldn't see too far because there was a mist in the air, and they used to use sawdust around machines. So okay, I don't remember exactly when, but they banned having sawdust in the plant, and so just that sort of thing. Cleanliness is always a good indication in any factory. The first impression when you walk in and you see the cleanliness of a place, it gives you an indication of how well people live up to the rules, that kind of thing. So if they leave dirt all around the place, then okay, they may tell you, yeah, we check a part every hour, but it's like, I'm doubting that, So anyway, my impression when I came back was that there was big improvements had been made during the time I was gone.
Can you maybe further maybe compare or contrast what it was like to work at GM versus BorgWarner? Or anything that comes to mind?
Okay, having come from the farm, I was talking to a guy about this just this morning. The differences between General Motors and working at BorgWarner, and okay, again, from my personal lifetime experience of having come from the farm, I was 17 and made hay. At that time, it was a lot of manual labor and making hay for $1 an hour on Friday, and in May of '67, and I started at Delco at the general factory rate, which was $3.14 an hour on Monday. And I can remember other co-op students saying, yeah, they're not giving me meaningful things to do. And at that time, they were all men too. There were not a lot of female co-op students. And I can remember telling them, hey, for $3.14 an hour, they can stick a broom up my ass and I'll sweep the floor at the same time as I run copies. But okay, it's part of the reason that there is no Delco anymore, part of the reason that there is BorgWarner. At Delco, in the worst cases I saw, there were people whose job, they could be done in an hour. And so they had 7 hours. So one of my experiences there, I was an afternoon supervisor. And so, okay, idle time is the devil's keeper. So people would sneak out of the plant and go get drunk, or sneak booze into the plant and get drunk. And there was a guy that was killed when I was an afternoon supervisor, that he was driving a mule, which is similar to the vehicles that airports use to tug luggage. And he cut the corner too close, and a stack of starting motor frames fell down upon him and crushed him. And I remember that the supervisor got fired for that, his supervisor. And I always thought, okay, could have easily been me that it was his supervisor, because it was like, how unjust is that? Because for my opinion, it's like as if the plant manager didn't know, as if all management didn't know that there were people who, I would say the average they worked was about 4 hours a day, and that 4 hours a day they're doing nothing. Just some people, as I say, would sneak out. Other people ring 2 clock cards, ring their buddy's clock card, take a turn or something like that. So, okay, coming to BorgWarner, it was a little bit different there, because BorgWarner had the incentive, or as everyone at BorgWarner said, the incentive program, which in '83 when I first came there, which was, okay, it's pretty simple, that for your idle time, you run more parts, we'll pay you more money. So, but still people would work 5-6 hours a day. And I don't remember what factory wage was. It was a little bit less than Delco, but still people made big money.
As a manager, what kind of interactions do you have on a daily basis with guys on the shop floor?
As a manager, interactions I had with the shop floor, probably more at Delco than at BorgWarner, because by the time I came at BorgWarner, it was more like supervisors, whereas at my time at General Motors, I supervised people directly. So, yeah, I have two sons, and the oldest son worked at Burger King, and so he was a 17-year-old manager at Burger King on the afternoon shift. And I remember one time he said to me, he said, "Dad, are all people pretty much assholes?" And I said, "You're starting to figure it out." And so, I mean, that's a negative view of things, but supervising people, I think, is a little bit like playing one-on-one basketball, that if you got to keep a little bit of pressure on your guy, just a little bit, or they'll back you into the bucket and shoot a layup every time. So, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly was never any badass. I mean, there's a lot of supervisors. I mean, at that time again at Delco and in the early '80s at BorgWarner, there was a very confrontational relationship between management and supervision. So, yeah, I've had to discharge people before. I had a guy shoot the windshield out of my car in the parking lot one time, you know. So, but all in all, I want to say though the really way I believe on that is when I put down on my insurance form, or sorry, my tax form, what you know, it asks what occupation is, I put factory worker, because I am a factory worker. You know, if the factory closes down, I got to find another job. You know, it's just the same as the guy that runs the machine. So I don't consider myself better to be on management or whatever. And that's something that, you know, I think I saw evolve. You know, there was a lot of work to try to make people think the way that for the people who worked on the shop floor. When I was a supervisor at Delco, I always felt like that I could envision in the future that they would put a padlock on the front door and say, okay, the factory's closed. And I could see the union manager or the union leadership in the parking lot with a keg of beer in the back of the pickup truck saying, "Yeah, we finally showed them bastards." You know, that's what I thought the relationship was. Just a touch better when I came to BorgWarner. And then finally, I think people realized, like, hey, you know, here we are fighting with each other. In the meanwhile, we're losing business. We all lose our jobs, you know. So I think that did improve.
Did you find any problems with guys on the floor, even with the incentive system, you know, in terms of goofing off or drinking on the job or anything like that? Was that a problem at BorgWarner?
Were there problems on the shop floor with the incentive system, goofing off, drinking on the job, as compared to at BorgWarner compared to Delco? I remember in '83, the first year I came there, at Christmas time, one of the day before Christmas there was like no work in the factory at all. And one of the other quality managers, he's like, "Hey, come on with me, we'll go get something to drink." And I'm like, "Huh?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it'd be like an open bar out in the plant," you know. So in the early '80s there, it was much worse. I mean, and I can say that drinking was never condoned, to my knowledge, at Delco. You know, never allowed, you know, of management knowing it. And okay, you know, certainly the last 20 years not condoned at BorgWarner. And that the day before Christmas, okay, in somewhere around 90 to 93, the incentive system was taken out of BorgWarner, meaning that people were paid on an hourly rate. And so the last few years, the day before Christmas, the day before Thanksgiving, people would have a carry-in, and actually you'd have pretty good production on those days, because people were in pretty good mood and they'd cover for each other. You know, versus typically people would be like, "Hey, that's not my job." Some people would be like, "Hey, that's not my job, you know, you can't make me do that." So the day before Christmas, the day before Thanksgiving, Now, on the incentive thing, there's a guy that I respected very much in the 80s that I used to argue with. He was very pro-incentive. I was, and still am, very anti-incentive. Because the problem with incentive, as I see it, or incentive, is that you're giving the guy very singular purpose. You're saying, for your spare time, if you make me more parts, I will pay you more money. And okay, in a lot of cases, I mean, the just-in-time, this sort of thinking, you really don't want more parts. You want the correct number of parts, and you want them good. Where, you know, incentive, again, most of my career in the quality department, people like, you're supposed to check 1 every 10 parts. Okay, that's how they can do the job faster, is this side work, not do that work. But where I'm getting to is the guy I think of, he used to say, Don, if you tell a person you get me 500, 5,000, whatever the number, some pegged number, you get me that number, you're done for the day. So actually I agree with him that if you have a pegged number and tell the person whether they're running singularly a machine, a lathe, you tell them give me 500, you're done for the day, or okay, I know all the assembly lines at BorgWarner had a pegged rate, get me 600 for the shift, you guys can be done for the shift. So if there were days where there wasn't an incentive program and there wasn't this pegged rate, there were very few of them, you know, that we went from the incentive of paying you more money. So a lot of operators took big cuts in pay, but okay, they still would get done. In 2007, when I left BorgWarner, I would say the average operator worked somewhere around 5 hours a day, meaning that there were people that would work, okay, in the worst case, someone's working, even by contract, 7.1. Because at BorgWarner, we worked 8-hour shifts with a paid lunch. I think it was 20-minute, 22-minute paid lunch and 2 10-minute, so, and then a 5-minute cleanup before the end of the shift. So there was one of our plant managers that tried a rallying cry of 7.1. That he was going to insist that everyone work 7.1, and he was a really tough guy. Still lives around here in town, and he couldn't get it done. And I always thought if he couldn't get it done, it can't be done.
What guys do with their extra time?
What people would do with their extra time is, I'm sure there was some drinking, I'm sure there was some drugs, but again, I feel like, you know, having said earlier that, you know, that it was condoned pretty much in the 80s, certainly by the end of the 80s, the 90s, and this, it was not condoned at all. You know, people caught would be discharged or disciplined severely. But mostly, I don't know, goof off.
What kind of interactions did you have with the union? What was your impression of the union?
My interaction with the union, my impression of the union, again, when I first came to BorgWarner in '83, there was, they used to say that a person that was going home early used to have to hold their pass up for other people to see, because in the past there had been so many wildcat strikes that the operators would see a guy leaving and think he'd been disciplined or think he was quote unquote walking out, and there used to be these wildcat strikes. Okay, that was before my time. You know, I never personally saw that. Although I believe it to be true, because Warner Gear had the reputation of these wildcat strikes and the like. And again, from my personal experience, it was always said that the union was really tough at BorgWarner, but from my opinion, not near as tough as the union at Delco. You know, the union at Delco, again, when I was a supervisor, the committeeman, you need to be sitting at a table, like a folding table, and there would be the employee and the union steward, and you as a 21, 25-year-old supervisor, and okay, he wasn't allowed to touch you, but he'd take the table and upset the table, and I can remember a guy that I still admire very much, that he said, guys, again, at that time we were all guys, he said, guys, cocksucker is the magic word. If a union guy calls you a cocksucker, we are not going to take it. We're going to discipline that guy. We're going to fire that guy. So, you know, you could be called a stupid motherfucker, and it was like, hey, we're not there yet, but so it was really bad, as in the early. So I never went through anything like that at BorgWarner. I never saw it at BorgWarner, So as I say, I think it was much worse at Delco.
This is kind of a broad question, but what were some of the good and bad aspects of working out at BorgWarner? What comes to mind?
Some of the good and some of the bad aspects of working at BorgWarner. Again, one thing for me, I think, is started at BorgWarner in '83, and so I had a lot of opportunity to travel. And in '83, when I started at BorgWarner, I personally had only ever been to Canada, and that was it. And for my personal most rewarding experience of working at BorgWarner is I remember in '87, at a management meeting, the plant manager said, "Hey, there's going to be a group of Chinese guys tour the plant next week, and there's a chance we might do a joint venture with them." So I hung around to try to get the plant manager by himself. So about 6 o'clock, he was by himself in the evening, and I went into his office and I said, "Hey, you said something about the Chinese and a joint venture." I said, "You need somebody to go." "I'll go. I'm your man." And he said, "Well, Don, that could happen, that we'd be sending over a small group and somebody from the quality department would be reasonable." So I went home that night and told my wife, "Hey, big news, there's this thing, and I'm dreaming that, we could end up living in China." And she's like, "You're crazy, But anyway, speed the story up a little bit. It took 5 years, and there was two big things happened. One was the Tiananmen Square massacre in '89. So all business, every company just stopped doing anything with China for 6 months, a year. And then BorgWarner made manual transmissions, and Chrysler has a joint venture in Beijing. They make Jeep Cherokees, and the BorgWarner transmission went in that vehicle. But then, so they were negotiating, and this joint venture was almost consummated. And then General Motors did a joint venture in China to make the S10 pickup truck, and our transmission was used in that. So the joint venture had to be renegotiated completely, which just made a longer period of time. But finally, in August of '92, my wife and I and our two sons at that time were 10 and 14. And so we lived in China for me, almost 3 years, and for my family, 2 years. So I never regretted leaving Delco. Although, Delco was good to me. I mean, I co-opted there, they paid my education. But, by choice, I prefer to stay in central Indiana. One of the things I said early in life is my goal is to never live in a city with more than 4 lanes. If it's got 6 lanes, it's too big of a city. Now, living in Beijing, I did, but that was a special deal, if you will. I mean, again, I was working at M&I, Marine and Industrial, boat transmission and industrial fork truck transmission at the time, and the business was moved to New Bedford, Massachusetts. And so they announced it on Friday, and really tried to play hardball with everybody, that they said, "Okay, the guys that are working Marine and Industrial, you have no chance to transfer back to the transmission." This is like in '89. "You have no chance to transfer back to the transmission to the fork truck portion of the business. That's forbidden." So they said, "Okay, we want to know, though, if you're interested to go to Massachusetts." And so I went home, talked with my wife, and Monday morning, straight away, I come in and told my boss. I said, "Hey, listen, if my choice is working for BorgWarner in Massachusetts or unemployed in Indiana, I got to take unemployed in Indiana. That I see no conceivable set of circumstances that end with me relocating to Massachusetts." So, again, that's during this portion. That time frame there was during this when the joint venture in China was taking place. So I'm using this to try to get my wife to agree. And so at the end of the day, I ended up, dragging her there, because I remember they finally did away with this rule that you couldn't transfer back. And really, I was offered a job back in the automotive portion rather than because at the same, all the time I'm in this marine and industrial, because I'm helping train my replacement, that kind of thing, helping with the relocation of the business. I mean, I spent almost a year out in New Bedford, Massachusetts, coming home like every other weekend or something like that. And so, it's like, well, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, hey, this China thing is still going more and more and more. And it was, and my wife's like, you're crazy. So finally I came home one night and it's like, hey, here's the deal. I can't, at work, I can't be politicking trying to get this job to move to China. And then the day before we're supposed to go say, we're not going. So I said, if you can't go, we'll not go. I said, yeah, I'll be disappointed, but I'm not going to get divorced. I'm not going to go over and live by myself. If you can't go, I'll respect that. She said, hey, I'll go. I said, how about them Red Wings? Change the subject right away. That there's no point, because I knew there's no point in saying like, that's not good enough. I want to hear you say, I want to go. So, okay, it was a very good experience for the whole family, I think. I mean, the two sons at the time, they absolutely hated me. My wife didn't want to go, And the two boys, I think it was a really good experience for them. In fact, one of my coworkers, and a guy that, I'd never been to his house, but, I'm not a very religious guy by nature, but this guy's a very Christian, I'd say a really good person. And he came to me and said, Don, I want you to know that my wife and I have prayed on this, and we're willing to have your boys stay with us when you're over in China. And I was like, what a nice gesture. I said, but you really don't understand that a big portion, the number one portion is that I wanted to do it myself. But seriously, my number two reason for going was I wanted to expose my boys to that. That, of course, the oldest one's blonde, blue eyes, even still. And so I wanted them to have the experience of being the minority. And they certainly did gain that.
So you were pretty tied to the Muncie community. You enjoyed living here?
Yeah, tied to the Muncie community. I enjoy living here, yeah. Again, right now I've been to like 41 different countries. And again, that's part of the going to BorgWarner allowed me to do that. And so at the end of the day, people are people everywhere in the world are exactly the same. I mean, Iraqi mothers cry when their children are killed just as much as American mothers. And our Iranian mothers, or pick whoever is supposedly our enemy. I believe that it's just our leaders that whip us up into this frenzy of hating another culture or whatever. But like, for example, again, I mentioned New Bedford in Massachusetts. Okay, my opinion is for sure the people in the Northeast, they tend to distrust you until they get to know you, and then once they get to know you, okay, again, people are people once you get to know them. Whereas like more famous, I spent a lot of time in Tennessee. When I worked for the Michigan company, we had a plant in Tennessee, and I think they're probably even better than we are here in central Indiana, that the people in the South are known for being more hospitable and more trusting to you until you prove to them that you can't be trusted, kind of thing. Whereas, say again, the people in the New England are more, they tend to distrust you until they know you and you prove to them that you can be trusted.
What do you think BorgWarner's place within the Muncie community was? Sounds like you did a lot of moving, so I'm not sure that you're not necessarily the right person to ask this question, but what was your impression of the importance of BorgWarner?
What was my impression of the importance of Warner Gear, within the Muncie community? Again, that makes me think of growing up in Portland. At that time, graduated in '67 from high school. That going to high school, you knew, like, I mean, again, I went, my degrees as an engineer, so it's like, there's not a lot of engineers work in Portland then or today. So at that time, Muncie was a big town. It had a General Motors plant, a BorgWarner plant, Westinghouse plant, Marhofer, a meat packing plant. So the kids that grew up in Muncie, the kids that grew up in Anderson, probably thought, I don't know, but they had the right to think, yeah, I'll stay living in Muncie all my whole life. So like now, the kids that grow up in Muncie, the kids that grow up in Anderson, they surely have to think like I did when I grew up. There's not a good chance of staying here local to do that. So, I mean, Warner Gear was an important part, just one of many. I mean, I don't know, 5 or 10 big companies with a lot of people employed. So, okay, all of those jobs. It's just not Warner Gear that's left town. I mean, it's all the jobs that have left town. Okay, for me, it's a little bit of a concern. I think it's part of the reason for the economic depression just now. That I saw a thing on TV a month ago or so, and it was about a guy that made drumsticks for drummers, and it was a place in Maine, the state of Maine, and this guy makes like 2/3 of all the drumsticks for the whole world. And I don't know, maybe you guys are familiar with it or whatever, but anyway.
Vic Firth, I think.
They had the mayor of this town, and he said, yeah, it's really a good thing that he's here locally, because he said all the other jobs have left and went to Mexico and China. And so it's not just the jobs from Muncie that have left and went to Mexico and China. It's like every CEO in the world, it's like, oh, I got an idea,
Yeah. I saw that too. That was an amazing story, that guy. He dominates the world drumstick market.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. But as a BorgWarner employee in Muncie, do you feel like, what kind of reaction do you get from people when you moved here in '83 and you said, yeah, I'm working at a BorgWarner, when you're talking to people at the grocery store, whatever? Was there any kind of special thing?
Well, the reaction from people when you worked at BorgWarner, again, I don't think it was as good as if you worked at General Motors, but it was like, okay, yeah, you're working for a big company, you got a good job, you make a good wage, gonna have a good life.
Were you here in '89?
Yes, I was here in 1989 during the strike.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. What kind of experiences did you have during the strike?
In 1989 during the strike, BorgWarner, okay, first from a salary employee point of view, it was kind of when I came to BorgWarner, maybe it started a little bit at GM before '83, but not much, in that salary employees had worse benefits. In '67, when I started to work at Delco, salary employees, okay, you had to be like a plant manager level or above to get the discount on cars. And I was a general supervisor when I left Delco, and so I had the A buyer discount for like something like 3 years before I left Delco, and then it went down to where every employee of General Motors was given that. But so the reason I bring that up is at Warner Gear, BorgWarner, like 6 months before the union contract was due, they had the salary employees had to start co-paying on their insurance, on their health care. And it was a little bit sold to us like, well, don't feel too bad about it because we're going to take it away from the hourly workers also. So that's really at least that's my memory of what the strike of '89 was about, was trying to tell the hourly workers, you got to co-pay. No more totally free health care. You have to co-pay yourself. And I don't remember exactly the days. In my mind, it was always like a 90-day strike, but I think people told me, no, your memory's bad on that. But for sure, I remember that the first day of the strike, our plant manager had all the salary workers up in the conference room, and he said, wear your blue jeans tomorrow. We're going to make parts. And when he said that, there were two things I thought, this will not work. And two big reasons I thought it'll not work. And the first one was that I had, and truth is still have, the feeling that the person that runs the machine knows the most about the machine. So I thought, man, you got all these people who are experts on running their machine, running their job. They're all gone. And you're going to take a group of people out there that don't know very much about it, and you're going to have them do the job. There are going to be a lot of problems. And the truth is that went a lot better than what I thought it would. Really, it was no problem. And my opinion on that now is, I still have respect for the people that do those jobs. You can't take that away. But I now think, if you have someone who does know about the job, like the engineer that set up the job, again, the guy that runs the machine, I believe he probably knows more than the engineer that set up the job. But if you have some fairly competent people, the salary people, well, it's not like they were incompetent people. In fact, I want to say, to me, if you just, went out to Kilgore Avenue and stopped the next 100 cars, you'd have like the average person, if you will. So I don't think you could have necessarily taken, stopped the next 100 cars and said, we're going to have you make parts. So, I'm saying there was a little bit better than average workforce of these salary workers. And so with a minimal amount of training, they were making parts just as good as the people who had run the machine or nearly as good as the people who run the machine for a long time. And then the second thing I thought is the machines will break down. Maintenance of the machines will be a big problem. And again, I was wrong. And I think, to be honest, I think that was a really big problem at BorgWarner. Bigger problem at BorgWarner than my experience at Delco, in that we had such a large number of maintenance workers there. And the rule actually, that was never said like this, but the rule really was you are forbidden from working on your machine. And the way that become that you were forbidden from working on your machine is that the maintenance people would use peer pressure to influence operators, hey, don't you do any work on your machine. So again, I thought we had hardly any maintenance people, during the strike period there. But okay, again, I do work on my car myself. So the machines I ran, if they broke and I didn't know how to fix them, a guy would come up and it's like, here, Don, let me show you what to do if this happens. Here's how you can do it. So a lot of things I'd fix myself. Okay, I couldn't fix everything myself, but if the guy came, I'd help him fix it. And okay, one of the things, and now to take the side of the maintenance guy then, one of the things by running the machines that I learned is, like, if I do this, it'll break the machine and it'll take an hour to fix it. Or if I do this, I break the machine and it takes a day to fix it. So to defend the maintenance guys, that, again, they're not stupid by any means either. So when they walk up to a machine and they can pretty well see, like, this guy just put this machine down for an hour. So it's like, I better take the hour to do it. Because if he works really fast and gets it done in 15 minutes, chances are within the day or a couple days later, he's going to come back and the machine's going to be broke the more severe way, to where it takes an hour or a day to fix it. So, I mean, it was a tough period. We rode together. I mean, actually, it wasn't my decision, but my boss, I think he overreacted. There was a policeman set in my driveway at night, but I never personally had any fear or anything. I thought it was a little bit awkward driving through the picket, but it's more like a picnic, if you will. I mean, an unusual event kind of thing. And the factory workers were, yelling at us and calling us scabs and everything. It's like, no. You need to look up the definition of a scab. I am not a scab because I really don't want your job. It wasn't like I had a choice. It wasn't like the plant manager said, hey, for those of you that want to, I mean, we were just pawns in this game being played by BorgWarner and the union.
So, why were there so many maintenance workers at BorgWarner? Or, what was the union's role in kind of protecting some of these workers that were running machines?
So why were there so many maintenance workers at BorgWarner? I think it's a union thing. Again, at the end of the day, I'm pretty much an anti-union guy. I mean, to defend the union for a second, I said I made the $3.14 an hour in '67. Okay, I think that's because of the union. That it's the pressure that they put on owners, management to that when the union got a raise, management got a raise also. And I think, okay, we're headed the opposite direction just now. But anyway, at BorgWarner, it's really bad that when a machine broke down, I mean, the number of skilled trades classifications, there's a electrician, and then there was a technician beyond electrician within the electrical trade, but there's a pipe fitter, there's millwrights, there's machine repair, there's tool makers. So I remember over one 4th of July shutdown. At this time I was in manufacturing engineering, and I went in to see how we were coming on an installation, and one of the guys worked for me. He said, man, Don, he said, maintenance guys are really hitting it and doing a really good job. I said, I don't want to argue with you, and I know that they really are, but I said, anywhere else in the world, you would have like one electrical guy, one mechanical guy. So I said, I know what you're saying. I said, but they're doing a good job with the system that we have. And because at any one time, there's one or maybe two of those guys working, and there's 5 guys, waiting for their. I mean, to be honest, I don't think anyone could tell you definitively, this is an electrician's job and this is a technician's job. I mean, with so many people, there would be at least disagreement, if you will. So I mean, from a management point of view, it was a nightmare. Meaning that okay, you try to become buddies with guys, if you will. You're like, hey, I know that's not really your job, but I'm really dying here. Could you help a brother out? I mean, and again, it's not just the maintenance guys. I mean, okay, what was the plant? Was a half mile long. When I left BorgWarner and went to Michigan, it was a non-union place. And one of the things I used to tell them, which is the truth, is when I left, to have a part taken from one end of the plant to the other, you had to have 3 different truckers haul the part. That there were zones within the plant, that this guy could only truck within this zone, this guy could only truck within this zone, and this guy could only truck within this zone. So to get a part taken from one end, I mean, anything to happen of its own momentum, to have a part taken from one end of the plant to the other, could easily take you more than a day. Now, if you were dying, again, you could go up to a guy and say, hey, listen, I have got to have that taken down to the other end right away. And so, like you knew who you could talk into doing it and who wouldn't do it. But even then, that guy was breaking the rule, and like if you got caught, there'd be a grievance against it, and people would get paid. Which, okay, I want to talk about that for a second. That people I thought were really good people, good Christian people. Again, just because I'm not religious, I don't think Christian people are bad. But good Christian people would think that they're being screwed because they had been bypassed on the balancing overtime. Balancing overtime was one of the biggest headaches. I mean, from a management point of view, it's like, I need a guy that can perform the job as well as the normal operator. But at BorgWarner, overtime was treated like it was the right of the worker. It was really impossible to administer. And like, for example, one of the things that would happen is you would end up with the day shift working more overtime than the afternoon shift or the midnight shift. So you'd get a grievance from the union of like, okay, you're not balancing hours equally, and we want 2,000 hours worth of pay that we can spread out and pay to people. And people that I respected and I thought had normally good thought process, they would just be absolute bitter, like, you're fucking me and you owe me that money. And just, I saw a lot of evil come out in people over the money on that.
This is a little different question, but what kind of presence in the community did BorgWarner as a company encourage from its employees? Were there certain things that were done?
What kind of presence in the community did BorgWarner encourage from its employees? To be honest, nothing like I felt at Delco. At Delco, junior achievement, I had to do like 2 years. And when I say had to do, small story is just after I graduated, they come around and took up money for the Republican Party. So, okay, I didn't have a lot of money. It's like, I'm not very political. So it's like, I don't think I'll give. So the head of the department called me in, had a small discussion with me. And after he had the discussion, I said, I see your point of view. And rather than giving $20, what about if I give 40? So again, this is early 70s. And I mean, he made it very plain. Like, if you want to keep your job, you give the Republican Party. It's up to you. Now, I mean, that kind of thing has been outlawed. It's against the law. But at Delco, again, there were 20 plants, 20,000 people. So organizations would be pretty clever, and they would get a plant manager from one plant to be the head of the drive for, I remember one was building an auditorium at the Church of God. And so severe pressure put on you, to the point where I heard a plant manager say, on this very case, on the giving money to the Church of God to build an auditorium, he said, hey, listen, he said, it's your decision and this is about 78. He says, it's your decision whether you give or don't give. He says, I can't tell you you got to do what you feel is right. He said, but, I'm the guy that decides on who gets raises and who doesn't get raises. And he said, I'll do the best to keep it out of my head on who gave and who. It's not very thinly veiled, pretty clear. So anyway, yeah, bond drives, the big pressure to be 100% on having people give the bond. And so again, I had people who worked for me that were Jehovah's Witness, and they said, hey, Don, it's against our religion. We see savings bonds as war bonds, and we're anti-war. It's like, yeah, but could you help a brother out here? So big pressure. And I never seen anything like that at Warner Gear. Now, there were people that did, but I can't say that I felt like it was organized pressure from the community. Or it wasn't organized pressure from the company saying, hey, you've got to be part of the community. You got to step up.
You work at a company that is potentially part of Muncie's kind of rebirth. Your company is growing. After talking to Dan Mills, anyway, sounds like it is. You've got an electric car coming, perhaps. Could you talk a little bit about what you see in Muncie's future now that plants like Chevy and BorgWarner have closed down? Where do you see Muncie as a community going?
To be honest, again, maybe because of my personal, where do I see the future of Muncie going? Where do I see even the future of, I work at Magna in Muncie. Okay, I already said I worked at Delco, and Delco has completely left Anderson. The buildings, not half the buildings are gone. Warner Gear just finished closing down. I think they'll tear that building down soon. The young guys I work with, I tell them, I don't see you retiring from the auto industry. In the 80s, the textile industry left. There was never really textile in this area, but the textile industry left the USA. I don't know. I just think one of the things I think is I'm young enough to remember when my father would be with my uncles, and he'd be talking about, oh, things are so bad today. This is before I graduated high school or whatever even. So I just think, Don, is that just you being old and thinking how bad things are today compared to where they used to be? But okay, I really don't think it. That I think there's too many CEOs that see that they can move work to Mexico, move work to China, and the real problem I see is that the world has become a global village, and there are people in that portion of the village that'll work for $1 an hour or whatever, $2 an hour, and send money back home to mom and dad, and think like, man, we have died and went to heaven. So that's a big change in my lifetime. I remember being at Delco, and I remember the plant manager, this is about 75 or so, saying, hey, good news for us that we're going to start quoting on Opel business, on making parts for Germany and Europe. And it's like, hey, we're going to start and for making parts for GM in Japan. And I was thinking like, oh, wow, this is great. But the part I was too stupid to figure out is that there were people in Japan and Germany and saying, hey, we're going to start quoting on making parts in the USA. So the whole world becoming a global village is certainly during my lifetime. I've seen a lot of that. So, okay, the big thing Muncie got going for it is Ball State. That Ball State's going to be here. My wife's nurse, medical profession going to be here. Okay, even back to that, my boys living in China. Although again, I've said how much I want to stay in this area. Part of them going to China is I want to teach them that there is an area other than Gaston, Indiana, and there's certainly nothing wrong with anybody that wants to stay living in Gaston. they're just using Gaston as an example, their whole life. But there is a whole nother world out there. And one of the things I told my boys is that it's a little bit unusual for Americans to think maybe I'll live overseas and work. But okay, the British have been doing it for 400, 500 years. I mean, British kids grow up thinking, what country am I going to work in? You know, so I think that's going to happen for Americans more and more. So again, I think Muncie will become a Portland, Indiana. Again, meaning that when I grew up in Portland, I knew like no good jobs. So that's my crystal ball.
Have you seen a lot of guys that you used to work with move out of town and go where the jobs are?
I don't know. Have I seen a lot of people move out of town and go where the jobs are? I don't know a lot, but at the BorgWarner, the hourly people didn't have the choice to do that. And the salary people, I'd say, yeah, a fairly big number did that, knowing that, like, hey, you know, BorgWarner has a plant in South Carolina and a plant in Texas. So quite a few people moved there, and it's like, yeah, they have to go where the job is.
You know, Mr. Miller, that's really all I've got for today in terms of questions. But at this point, I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about anything that I might have missed or not asked you that you'd like to talk about concerning BorgWarner, working there, and kind of the effect of the closure on the community.
Okay, you know, I have a very good feeling for BorgWarner. BorgWarner was really good to me. Made a lot of money where I worked there. You know, put my kids through college. And so one of the things I'd say in that regard was that when BorgWarner made the announcement that, like, hey, we're going to move the plant, I can remember another salary guy saying to me, well, you ought to be really happy now. And I said, yeah, you know, I'm not sure how much you blame the union on this, because it wasn't the union's decision to move the place. And that I think, you know, even if the union had given concessions, it would have been moved sooner or later. So to be honest, I don't blame the people for not, you know, giving concessions. It's just, again, it's certainly like BorgWarner was one of the last places to leave town, you know, rather than the first. So, you know, again, a good experience at BorgWarner. I guess that's it.
All right. Thanks a lot.